Oh yeah, welcome back everybody to Three Things with JR. I am your host, JR. This is episode 6, also known as Sixth Thing. We are evolving as a podcast, and I say we, there's no we. It's just me here doing this podcast all by my lonesome. It was my idea, nobody else's, and this is what I'm doing. But we are changing it up a little bit. So far in the podcast, for most of the episodes, we did 3 old things from the genesis of the idea of 3 things, and then we did 3 new things. And we're just not going to do the old things anymore. There's not enough of them. They're old news. They were good when they came out in 2013. They're not relevant so much anymore. So we're just going to live in the now. How about that? Little carpe diem, little seize the day. We're going to live for the now. Also, I'm thinking it might be cool to have guests on the show because you probably will get sick at some point of hearing just what I think about whatever it is I'm thinking about. And I thought it might be kind of cool to find out what other people think about different things. And so if you are hearing this and if you know me, get in touch and maybe you can be a guest on this show. Here's the deal. If you're going to be a guest, you are going to share your 3 things. That's it. It's simple. The 3 things and how it works, if you don't know already, the thing number 1 is just something you're thinking about that's kind of thoughtful, kind of deep, kind of meaningful, maybe. It could be something from the heart. It could be something about a loved one. It could be a Hallmark card that moved you. It could literally be anything you're thinking. Think Deep Thoughts with Jack Handey, except not so goofy, right? For real. But kind of have that mindset, that Deep Thoughts with Jack Handey mindset. If you don't know what that is, well, YouTube it or whatever. It was a little skit on Saturday Night Live years ago. And burping is okay on this podcast. So thing 1, bring it to the table if you want to be a guest and just try to have something thoughtful and meaningful to say, and then we'll talk about it. Thing number 2, when you come on as a guest, I'm going to ask you to think about and tell us about something musical or something from pop culture. It could be a movie, a TV show, music, a book, anything like that that's moving you. Why? It could be a band you hate and why. It could be a band you love and why, and anything in between. It could be one note of a song that gets you right there in the feels. Whatever it is, let's talk about what's moving you in the world of music and or anything else from pop culture. And then once we're done talking about that, thing number 3 is just something goofy or silly. I often seem to resort to bodily functions for my goofy, silly things, but it's not always that, as you'll see here today when I do my 3rd thing. It's not about bodily functions, but it is a little silly. Just something funny or silly that you're thinking about or that you'd think about on a regular basis and you just want to share. And we'll talk about that. So we are looking for guests, more people that want to get on here and talk about their 3 things. We can make this happen in person. I'm not opposed to that. If you live near me, I'll come to you with a microphone and we can sit and chat on your front porch and talk about 3 things. Or if you'd rather do it virtually and stay away from each other, we can certainly make that happen too. Zoom, Facebook Messenger, Microsoft Teams, whatever it is we need to do to get us onto my computer where I can record us. Either way, we can make it happen. So 3 things, taking applications for guests. Application, whatever. If you want to be on the show, let me know. If you listen to episode 4, you might remember the 3rd thing was all about how my mother did not teach me to wash my hands after going to the bathroom. And I told a little story about that. And when she heard that episode, she started texting me right away and reminded me and told me that slander is against the law. And I had to remind her that it's not slander if it's true. And then she asked me to stop lying about her on my podcast. And I told her that she should get her own podcast if she wants to dispute what I'm saying on my podcast, and that I will continue to speak the hard truths that people need to hear. So there you go. A little bit of clarification on thing number 3 from episode 4, all about washing hands and how my mother didn't teach me to do that. And she must be a little bit embarrassed. And I apologize, Mom, for throwing you under the bus like that. But I didn't do it until after I talked to you about it and you admitted to it and told me why. And I don't think you have anything to be ashamed at. I think I turned out okay. I'm still here. I haven't got the corona yet, and I'm now washing my hands most of the time. So there you go. And now, before we get on to this week's three things, a drum solo. And we are back. Welcome back, everybody. It is time for this week's three things. A couple weeks ago, my daughter called me. She was having car trouble. She asked me if I could help. I asked her some questions over text or on the phone, and we couldn't quite determine what the problem was, but she thought it was pretty serious. She thought maybe it was a thrown rod in her engine, that it was a bad problem. So I thought I'll come over and check it out. I mean, I'm no mechanic. I'm not the kind of guy that could diagnose or much less fix a thrown rod in an engine, but I know a little bit, so I figured I'd come over and check it out. When I got to her house, she wasn't there, but the keys were there, so I grabbed the keys, got out in the car, and tried to start it. Now, what she told me the problem was that it would start, but it wouldn't continue running. And I was a little concerned because I had just installed a stereo in her car, so I wanted to make sure that it wasn't anything I had done as a result of a car stereo installation. But when I got there, I turned the key, it did start up, and then it shut right back off. And the battery seemed good and strong. So I was pretty confident that nothing I had done caused this, and I was breathed a sigh of relief about that. But it sounded to me like a simple, easy-to-fix problem because I was looking at the gas gauge, and I noticed that it was well below a quarter of a tank, but not fully empty. Like, it showed that there should certainly be enough gas to run the car and get it to a gas station, but it just would not keep running. And I thought, what are the chances? This is like a 13, 14-year-old car. Maybe the gas gauge isn't as accurate as it once was. So I went to my truck. I got a gallon of gas, which I keep in the toolbox in my truck. I poured it into her gas tank, and sure enough, her little Mazda 6 started right up. I felt so good about things. I let it run for a little while. I turned it off. I turned it back on, and the car was just running great. So I took it out. She still wasn't home yet. She was out at the store. So I grabbed her car, took it out, went to the gas station, filled it up. I went over to the auto parts store there in Gordonsville, O'Reilly's Auto Parts, and I got her some windshield wiper fluid, filled that up. I replaced her shifter knob, which was kind of worn out. And I was just feeling like dad of the year, right? I diagnosed the problem, I fixed the problem, and I went above and beyond by filling up her tank with gas and doing a couple extra things. I thought, man, I cannot wait. But how do I break this to her without making her feel stupid? Because that could easily be done, right? So I thought I could tell her I have good news and I have bad news. But then I realized that there's actually a way to break the good news and the bad news at the same time. So when she got home, I explained to her, hey, here's the deal. I've got good news and bad news, and I'm going to give them both to you in one sentence. Are you ready? She looked at me quite skeptically, and I said, yeah, your gas gauge isn't quite right. And it hit her. It hit her right away. She knew exactly what I was saying, and she was skeptical of my diagnosis. She said, I thought it was low on gas, but I was like, yeah, no, it was low. That's as soon as I put gas in it, it started running. She thought, okay. And then I told her I drove it to the store and back. And she said, oh, okay. How did it sound when you were driving it? And I told her it sounded pretty good. She's like, was there a clicking sound? I said, yeah, every once in a while, but it just seemed like older engine noises. And she said, no, that clicking sound, someone told me that's bad. It needs something. And I said, I don't really think so, but you should probably take it to a mechanic and check it out. Sure enough, she did. She called me the next day and said that it was definitely a big engine problem and that she was going to need a new motor that was going to cost $900 plus installation. And it was not just a faulty gas gauge. Bummer. Bummer for her. She's going to have to buy a new engine. Bummer for me because I felt slightly less dad of the year like. I mean, I was still pretty awesome for doing what I did, but maybe I didn't know as much as I thought I knew. So there you go. That's thing one. Thing number two. I've always been a huge fan of talk radio, especially funny, fun talk radio. When I was a kid growing up, I lived in the DC area. I loved Don and Mike on several different radio stations. They were on one station in the morning, and then they moved to a different station in the afternoon. They moved to the same station that Howard Stern was on, and I just absolutely loved listening to these guys talk and do voices and play games and have fun and take calls. And they were irreverent, they were funny, and they always seemed like they were breaking the rules of radio. As they were thoroughly entertaining me. I couldn't stop listening. Absolutely one of my favorite things. Don and Mike are no longer on the air, haven't been for a while. Howard Stern still is, and I moved with him over to satellite radio, and I have been listening to Howard Stern since I was a kid, since Fartman, since he was on DC 101 in DC. Then he moved to New York. I couldn't listen to him for a long time, and then he came back. He got syndicated to DC, and I was able to hear his show as I was in high school and afterwards, and well into adulthood. He's still on the air now, and I've been listening to him forever. I haven't missed a minute of his satellite radio show until recently, and I'm no longer a fan. I've just kind of fell out of the habit of listening to him. And part of the reason, in fact, the main reason, is podcasts. I have grown to love podcasts more than Howard Stern, which is weird because as a Howard Stern fan, I heard him many times talk about podcasts, talk about how they were not a way to get famous, to get successful, to grow an audience, to become a professional podcaster. Sure, a famous person could start having a podcast and they could have a decent listenership, they could get ads, they could make money doing it, but it's because they were already famous. If you were trying to grow your show from the ground up, you're not going to be able to do it as a podcast. He felt strongly about this and shared his opinion quite a lot, actually, on the radio. And I really, at the time, when he started really talking about this, I wasn't a podcast listener. But then I started thinking about it, and I started checking it out, and I started listening to a few podcasts, and I started listening to podcasts from people I knew, comedians I'd met, things like that. And now, that's all I listen to. I've got about 20 different podcasts on my feed, and there's more podcasts than I have time to listen to. Just like there used to be no time left, not enough time in the day to listen to all the Howard Stern I wanted to listen to. So now I don't have time for Howard anymore, and I feel bad about that because I love him. I think he's great. Wonderful interviewer, and I think his show has broken all of the molds of radio. Certainly, it's paved its own way. It's raised the bar. It is something nothing like nothing else, and it's amazing. However, it's just not what I'm into right now. I'm kind of in my own into podcasts now. I did have my own radio show back 25 years ago. I used to be a part-time DJ on 3WV here in Charlottesville, and I even did an overnight show from 3 to 6 a.m. at WTJU, which is the UVA station here in Charlottesville. And it was great. I worked at both stations each week, and every now and then I would mix up the call letters. So I was at 3WV one week, and I announced that this was WTJU when I was actually at 3WV. And I didn't even notice. I didn't hear it. I didn't know that I had done that until I received a call on the hotline, the super secret phone number that comes right into the studio. And the person on the other end said, "Hello, is this Adam Zant?" That was my stupid radio name. I said, "Yes, sir." "Who's this?" He says, "This is so-and-so. I'm the corporate lawyer for Your Communications." They were the owner of the radio station. So he knew all the names, and he totally informed me that he was the corporate lawyer and that we had a problem. I had broken the law and used the wrong call letters. FCC was going to probably fine us and all of that. He totally had me going until he let me off the hook and said, "No, I'm just kidding, man. I'm a listener. You just said the wrong call letters. You might want to try not to do that." And he was right. I stopped doing that. I made sure to use the right call letters. The other fun thing that happened every single Saturday night that I was at 3WV was we would get calls, requests. Now, I don't know what you think happens when you call a radio station and request a song. And back in the 70s and the 60s and the 80s, and when radio and terrestrial radio was the main way to listen to music and discover new music, and you had live DJs on the air 24/7, you could actually call a radio station and make a request, and there was a chance that they would play your request for you. They might even say your name. They might even play the audio of your call. However, that has grown less and less frequent and less possible. And when I worked at 3WV, we were still playing songs off of CD. I had a list of songs to play every hour. However, there was nothing really stopping me from playing a different CD if I wanted to honor a request. And we weren't supposed to do it very often, but if it kind of fit with the hour of music, then we were allowed to do that. The only problem was that every single Saturday night, and I believe every night at this radio station, this same guy called, and he would ask for the same song. And he was clearly a good old boy from the outskirts of Charlottesville who has been listening to 3WV as long as it's been on the air. And it's kind of like Charlottesville's redneck classic rock radio station. And it was then too. And this gentleman would call and he would say, "Yeah, I got a request." And I'd say, "All right, man, what you want to hear?" Knowing every single time who it was and what he wanted to hear. And "Yeah, I'm going to play Train by Molly Hatchet." It's a Train by Molly Hatchet. You got it. And then he would hang up and I would hang up, and of course I wouldn't play it. For one, I don't think that song's actually by Molly Hatchet. Train is by Blackfoot. I've searched. I cannot find a Molly Hatchet version of Train. I don't know. Maybe they played it live in concert one time and he just wanted to hear it. I don't know enough about redneck rock to actually be able to authoritatively say that Molly Hatchet never did Train. However, I didn't have it. I couldn't play it for him if I wanted to, and he wanted me to every single Saturday night. Train by Molly Hatchet. It's one of my favorite things, one of my favorite memories of working at the radio station. Oh, and let me point out, Howard Stern is totally wrong. I am already making money from this podcast. That ad you heard earlier for Anchor, it's the only ad I've done on a podcast. This is episode 6. I've just started telling people that my podcast exists. I've got 37 plays. I've got on average, 7 listeners listening to each episode. I have already made, in that short amount of time, with that tiny little audience, I have already made 13 cents. Now, that's after the 16 cents. That's the 16 cents is the gross. 13 cents is my take after, I guess, whatever. Anchor takes their percentage off the top. So in that short amount of time, with this little amount of effort, boom, I am making money. That's more money than I've spent on stuff to make this podcast. And my time, it's not worth anything. It's fact, I'm doing this because I want to. It's not work. This is what I want to be doing. So 13 cents, 7 listeners, 37 plays. That's amazing numbers to me. It's already more than my band has made on Spotify. So there you go. Also, checking into the numbers, I've got the analytics of my podcast here. It's, for the most part, an estimated analytic because the audience size is too small to do much with. The top episodes, the first thing is the most listened to episode so far with about 15 plays. Second, third, and fourth thing, it's just like a big smiley face I'm looking at. Second thing is down around 5. Third thing, fewer than 5. So the audience dropped off pretty big time. But it ramped back up with the fourth thing. That was the hand washing episode. I think Mom might have been the reason for that. That's around 6 listeners. And fifth thing, the one I did last week, out in the middle of a creek in the Rapidan Wildlife Management Area. That one was a lot of fun, and that one has almost 10 listens. So it's kind of like a big smiley face of listeners here. And you can see, where are people listening to my show? I've got the geographical location of my audience. 92% of my audience right here in the good old United States. But 7% of that very small audience is in Japan. I don't know how they found it in Japan. I did put tags on this last episode, so maybe somebody searched for whatever tags I put in there, and they found them, and they listened to it. So I've got a Japan, a listener in Japan is basically what it boils down to. And where are people listening? I've got them, of course, listening on the Anchor website, which is the link I sent out. But several people have found us on Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Apple Podcasts. No matter where you're listening to it, it would be awesome if you would rate the podcast, write a review of the podcast, and of course, tell all your friends to listen as well. And I would certainly appreciate that. All right, well, that was the longest second thing I've ever done. How about third thing? House shoes. Yeah, I have a pair of house shoes. So you know how Mr. Rogers would come in and he would change his shoes from his outdoor shoes to his indoor shoes? I don't really do that. It's not exactly a Mr. Rogers situation. But with all of this working from home, I don't like walking around barefoot. I have hardwood floors. My feet hurt. I'm overweight. I broke my ankle. My feet. It's just no fun walking around barefoot. And so I want to have shoes that I can wear around the house, but I don't want to have my actual shoes that I wear all the time. I don't want to wear socks. So I've just got some nice, comfortable slip-on shoes that are most definitely like 80-year-old man wearing slippers. They're not exactly slippers, but almost slippers. It's those kinds of shoes. I feel like I should be wearing white socks and shorts, and I almost am. It's definitely a sign that I am getting old. I'm 45, going to be 46 later this year. And those of you older than me are like, you're not old, youngster. And those of you younger than me are like, good God, what's up, Grandpa? And I actually am a grandpa, so they're not wrong. But I don't feel as old as I am until I see myself in the mirror wearing my house shoes. And I'm like, oh shit, I'm actually older than I look older than I think I am. So it's sort of a weird dichotomy there of feeling and looking older and younger than I am at any given time. And, well, there you go. House shoes. If you want to feel like an old man, start wearing some comfortable slip-ons around the house, and it'll do the trick. Wow. All right. That's 3 things. Episode 6. Thank you so much for listening all the way this far to the end. I'm not going to do the counter thing. I've been listening. I've been paying attention. I'm pretty confident I'm saying and less than I used to, and I'm pretty freaking excited about that. So without further ado, let's end the episode with a drum solo.